Welcome back, everyone, to the Broker Room Podcast. Today we have joining us from Greensville, South Carolina, Arn Cenedella. Welcome, Arn.
Hey, Michael. Happy to be here. Look forward to having a nice chat with you.
Me as well, sir. Thank you. And so, let's start at the beginning here for our listeners. You've been in real estate for nearly 50 years now. Why don't you walk us through what that journey looked like from the Bay Area single-family days to building a multifamily syndication practice in the Southeast?
There's a lot to cover. Typical kind of middle income, middle class American kid. Parents emphasize going to school, getting, doing well, getting a good education. Ended up getting a master's of science and chemistry of all things from the University of Michigan. Never did anything with it. Wanted to return to the Bay Area where my dad had opened a residential real estate office. And I had the good fortune to sell homes in probably the greatest residential market in the world, Palo Alto and Menlo Park, California, which is basically Silicon Valley, and did that from 1978 to 2014. Started to build a rental portfolio, first in the San Francisco Bay Area, but then I was fortunate enough to get into Austin, Texas around 2000. Maybe at one point owned about 30 homes. The local ones I managed myself. The remote ones I had property managers. 2014, moved to Greenville, South Carolina, kind of continued the residential. And then at COVID, a young investor friend called me up and he said, Arn, what do you think COVID's going to do to rents? And it was about the middle of March. And I said, well, Mario, I've collected all my March rent. Call me about April 5th and I'll let you know what's going on. And at the end of the conversation, he turned me on to a podcast, was about multifamily, and I was intrigued. I started consuming podcasts, getting me educated in multifamily investing, which is still residential, but it's a little bit different than the single family I had been doing. And then I would say summer of 2020, maybe just a little less than 6 years ago, started Spark Investment Group and started doing multifamily syndications in my new hometown, Greenville, South Carolina.
Excellent, excellent. So it's quite a journey you've had. And, going back to, around COVID, it sounds like, right after that is what, made you make that switch. Was there anything in particular that prompted it? Was it COVID itself, or did you identify, just a better opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we all know there's an issue with housing affordability, housing availability in the United States.
Oh, sure.
And apartments, multifamily properties are kind of one of the more affordable options for people here in the United States. And of course, there's an undersupply and there's a huge demand for people who need affordable housing. So I kind of identified multifamily as a very strong play investment-wise just due to kind of the supply-demand imbalance and the need for kind of affordable housing. And then perhaps the second reason would be, if you think about it, at one point I maybe owned 30 rental houses and they could have been spread out amongst 4 or 5 cities, and then within the cities all spread out, and they're all different, right? Each house is pretty much unique. And so one of the great things about multifamily, you buy a 30-unit apartment building, you have 30 sources of income in one location. You don't have to run all over. And oftentimes the units are identical. Like, for example, in many of our complexes, we have 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. The 2-bedroom units all have the same floor plan. The 1-bedroom units have all the same floor plan. So you can imagine when we're renovating these units, upgrading them, new cabinets, counters, flooring, it's kind of become a rinse and repeat operation. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right?
Sure.
You need 4 foot of countertop, you need whatever, 800 square foot of luxury vinyl plank. And so there's a way to systematize it. And of course, with your work crews, there's always a process of education. You go into a unit the first time and you kind of figure out how best to do it. But once you've done it once, now you got the thing down and you can really ramp up efficiency. So I like the ability to kind of rinse and repeat. And then I think the third issue is multifamily investing. They often call it a team sport. And what that means is usually it's not a one-person operation. Usually there's a team, typically 2, 3, 4 people who are kind of running the operation. And of course, as you bring in teammates, each of us has our unique skill sets. We have things we like to do. We have things that we're good at. We also have things we hate to do and we're not very good at. So by moving to multifamily, I was able to partner with 2 people who have the type skills and actually temperament to handle the aspects of the business that are critical and necessary, but that wasn't necessarily my forte. So by forming a team, each team member can handle the area of responsibility that they're best at, and then you have trusted partners that handle other areas, and it becomes kind of a smoothly functioning team. So I really enjoy that. For me, I love talking to investors. I love hunting for property. I love the chase of trying to find a good deal. But if I was to be honest, I don't have as much enjoyment on the day-to-day operations of rental property, collecting the rent, fixing the toilet, blah, blah, blah. Fortunately, I have a partner who loves to do that, and he's got a great team, and he's fabulous at it. And then my other partner, so Brian's the operational partner, Dan, kind of a CFO background. The guy, I lovingly describe him as a nerd. He loves spreadsheets. He loves looking at numbers. He takes care of the financials and accounting. And so each of us are able to kind of excel in an area that we're highly skilled at and that we enjoy. So that would probably be the third and final reason why I kind of made the shift to multifamily.
Yeah, it looks like you've got an excellent setup there. You handle more big picture. Partner number 1 handles the more day-to-day, and then partner 2 handles all the financial aspects of it, sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hell of a system. Now that you've got that system in place and you made this change, let's see, COVID was 6 years ago.
6 years ago, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And so, a lot has changed obviously in the last, 6 years. Any new, trends you see in the multifamily space now emerging as we go into, especially as we evolve into the new age of technology and AI, what have you?
Yeah, so that's a fabulous question. And I'm a great person to ask this question because I got into the business 1978. And if you can believe it, fax machines were a big deal. Car phones were about a foot long and they'd sit in the middle of your thing. And Microsoft Excel wasn't invented then. Microsoft Excel wasn't invented to the late 80s. The World Wide Web, nobody had ever heard of it. Nobody had ever heard of email. And so I've been blessed to live through a period of great technological growth. When I was a realtor getting started, the realtors had these little black books with each listing page, and you'd carry around this black book and you'd make hand entries and change the price. And now, of course, all the information about all the properties is available to the entire public. They have access to this information. They know what single-family houses are on the market. And so it's just continually evolved. Automations. Of course, it's now 10 years old, but social media wasn't always around, and social media was a big change. And I use LinkedIn and Facebook quite a bit to kind of market and connect with people. And then, of course, today, kind of the new kid on the block is AI, and we're just starting to see the kind of practical application of AI into the real estate business. So, for example, many multifamily operators turn over their lead capturing of prospective tenants to AI and chat box. Rently has one, and so they can kind of automate these systems. So when a prospective tenant sees a listing, they can immediately reach out, contact, and through AI get a response immediately as opposed to waiting for me to call them back. They can also schedule appointments to see apartments through the AI system. And so that's at least one area where the marketing and leasing of units is really starting to shift to AI and some kind of automated systems. So that's for one. We're also starting to see operators. Operators are like investors, syndication sponsors who do these multifamily apartment deals. And we do what's called underwriting, where we kind of analyze the income and expenses of the property, forecast future income and expenses. Microsoft Excel is certainly a big part of it, and it's a change from when I got into the business. But now AI is even being used to create these underwriting models where basically the AI system goes through the underwriting process that we used to do kind of by hand, inputting the data and this and that. And so many operators are now using artificial intelligence to kind of do that first pass underwriting. If they look at 20 deals a week, they can't take 2 hours a deal to analyze it, right? They need to be able to put it through the system, and of those 20, maybe 3 prop out the other side that then maybe are able or worthy of a real deep dive. Artificial intelligence has started to be used to kind of do that first pass underwriting to eliminate properties that aren't going to work so the operators can focus on those that do.
Yeah, yeah. AI has, played a very huge role, and thank you for your insight there, on what trends you've noticed and have seen in the industry. Some people even say that they might be worried about it, taking over, so to speak, but there's certain places, real estate being one of them, where, I just frankly could not see that happening. I mean, yes, it's going to help make things more convenient, more scalable, just better process. But, I don't foresee people actually, going to AI and saying, hey, I need a home, what do you got for me?
Yes, and you are so right. It's a tool. It increases productivity. It takes over kind of repeatable tasks, but you're still dealing with human beings. And in the residential world, buying a home is one of the biggest financial decisions a person will make, right?
Yes.
It's a big decision. Where's their family going to live? What are the schools? And so their fear can come up, concern, anxiety. And one of my jobs as a residential broker through the decades was to help people through this emotional roller coaster that buying a home is. So still that ability to build trust and connection with another person is still very important in real estate, and I don't know that AI is going to replace that. And even in the commercial real estate space, which is more about the dollar sign, it's not about, well, do you like the color of the tile in the kitchen? Building a rapport with the seller or buyer is still important. So I think that personal connection, helping people through this process, will still always be required, but AI certainly helps with let's call it the business funnel or the property funnel that you're putting through, you're analyzing these properties as they come in.
Absolutely, fully agreed. With respect to AI, we just talked about how, it affects the industry, the trends we're seeing. Have you seen it, in your practice at all? Have any of you or your partners, experimented with it?
Yes, and I will say we're a little bit smaller outfit, and we're all 50 years old or more, so the technology is all new. You're kind of and I'm 70 something. You're a product of your generation. So yes, we are starting to use it in tenant application and capture process. We focus in a very narrow market, Greenville County, South Carolina. So we don't need to use AI so much to analyze neighborhood trends and census trends and demographic data, which many operators who invest across the country do. We have automation for newsletters. We use AI to prepare our offering memorandums that we send to investors when we're trying to raise capital. I would say we're slowly integrating it in to our day-to-day practice, and we'll continue to do so. And I think to the degree that you're trying to scale and really increase your business, I think the value of AI just goes up from that point on.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, with respect to your practice and how you've used it so far, you see yourself in the next 6 to 12 months, implementing it more? Are there things that you would think it could, or challenges that you think it could help solve better?
Yeah, and I think that would be perhaps more within my partner's domain, because Brian kind of handles the operations, the collection of the rent, tracking of all the expenses, and then Dan on the financial accounting point of view. So I think, yes, they will start to use those tools more as time goes on. And, I think it's important that one try to remain contemporary. So from my own perspective, yes, I kind of want to try to just keep up with the latest trends in the industry, to maintain some kind of competitive equality with other operators in the market. So personally, I've started to use Chat GPT and Claude, and I've kind of come up with a way that they can mimic my voice, if that makes sense, so that when I create content, systems kind of understand how I think about things and the kind of words I use. And so on a personal level, I've used both of those resources to help produce some content, both for social media as well as communications with our investors.
Okay, yeah. And that makes sense too. Like I said before, it is, ever evolving, and, I think it's definitely going to play a bigger role, for all of us in the time to come. Having said that, we are coming up on time a bit, but one thing, I always like to say towards the tail end of the podcast is, for anybody looking to get into the multifamily space today, any words of wisdom on getting started?
Yeah, I would say, one, get educated. Knowledge is power. Your competition is experienced, sophisticated investors. So you have to have a certain knowledge base. And I can say to myself, my two biggest sources of education for multifamily investing have been podcasts and conferences, where I go to one or two conferences a year and a bunch of operators come in. And then from there, I would say pick a market or two, because ultimately you need to know your market. Investors often ask me, well, what's the best market to invest in? Is it Dallas, Texas, or is it Charlotte, North Carolina, or is it Phoenix, Arizona? That's not the answer. My answer is the best market to invest in is the market you know best. Mm-hmm. So people have made millions investing in New York City because they know that market like the back of their hand. Same with San Francisco. So pick a market or two, get out in the market, start networking with the brokers, the property managers, start to get to know the properties, know what the values are, know what the rents are, because it's only when you have confidence in your analysis of the market that you're able to pull the trigger and buy something. And certainly AI can play a role in that too, by pulling a lot of this data together for you and kind of making comparisons. So get educated, choose a market or two, drill deep in those markets, don't spread yourself too wide. And then I guess the other thing I would say is start slowly, build steadily, grow as your talent and experience increases. Real estate's a great way to create financial freedom. And if you do it right in kind of a proper sequence, the way I describe it is, if you're a beginner skier and you go up to the top of a double black diamond, you're probably not going to make it down the hill, right? And it's no different from investing. You're investing, don't go out and buy 200 units if you've never owned a rental before. Start with the fourplex, get a little experience. If that goes well, then you go to 12 and you start building that way. And let's be honest, I've made mistakes in my day. Any human activity is going to result in mistakes. So it's part of the learning process. But what I would say is make the mistakes small enough that you can live to fight another day. And the benefit of that education is more than the financial cost, if that makes sense to you.
Of course, experience is the best education. I think anybody, will tell you that, no matter what, path they choose, what industry they're in. So fully agreed on that. Very
Yeah.
insightful.
Yeah.
And so, Arn, this has been fantastic. You've given our listeners a ton of real world insight from somebody who's been in the trenches for nearly 5 decades now, and also some really excellent insight into how new technology has affected the industry today. So, for folks who want to learn more about what you're doing or even potentially work with you, where would be the best place to connect or find out more?
Yes, so my website is investwithspark.com, all one word, investwithspark.com, and I'm active on LinkedIn and Facebook, either under my name, Arn Cenedella, or Spark Multifamily Investment Group.
Fantastic. Thank you again for that, Arn. That's all for today. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Hope you have a good one.
Thank you so much, Michael.